Hello everyone, and thank you very much, Evan, for inviting me to the symposium. I think this is a really great idea, and I have never done this on Zoom before, so I'm very excited about that. And I'm very excited to be talking to you today because I think I've been really fortunate to be able to do or try out something that most people have only talked about, and that is try out Holacracy. And the main thing for me was that I really got some of my beliefs challenged, and really challenged myself to be open around this method. I also think that this is an interesting story because there are very few companies around the world who have introduced Holacracy in a commercial setting. And I want to talk about this, this company I did this with, which is a company in Wellington, New Zealand, who have managed to go from a normal company to a completely self-organising organisation. And the company I'm talking about is called Snapper. They are about 60 people and they provide transport ticketing. What that means is basically if you take the bus or the train and you have those little cards and you tag on and off, they are the people who make this happen in the background. They have been Agile since 2010, and this is where I admit I'm a consultant. I'm the person who helped them already in 2010, and I think they've probably been my favorite client, most favorite client ever. Snapper already in 2010 has had a great culture, and there was not really a crisis in 2016 when I started working with them again. The problem they had though was that they knew they were growing and they were successful, and adding people was something that was really hard. And they knew that if they were really successful and grow even more, what they needed to do was find a way to grow without either turning into complete chaos or turning into a huge bureaucracy. And while they were scratching their heads and worrying about things growing and things falling off, the wheels basically falling off, they were thinking about how the hell could we make this happen, did a lot of reading, and the one thing they stumbled across was Holacracy. And one of the things that attracted them most and attracted me most about this was this quote out of the Holacracy book. And that's by Tony Hsieh from Zappos. And I think it's a really good observation because what happens in a city is that we don't introduce more centralized governance. We do have some rules, we have constraints, we have regulations, but we don't organize every little detail on in all the areas. People can still decide what shop goes where. It doesn't say where you need to live. Nobody tells you how to what to put into your apartment. And basically what Snapper wanted was turn into a city rather than a big bureaucracy. And what attracted them so much was that there seemed to be a shared belief about collaboration. And that belief was rooted in that if you treat people well, if you treat them like responsible adults, what happens is that they will behave like responsible adults. And if you do want to make decisions well and you want to make them quickly, then you need to move authority where the information is, and also need to make sure that people have all the information and direct line of sight of the purpose to make good decisions. And I'm not sure if everyone knows exactly what Holacracy is, but in a really quick way of introducing it, it's a method of organizing a truly self-organizing organization. Some people also phrase it like, sorry, this is just going nuts. Sorry, just going back because I have a delay. And I really hope my keynote is not crashing. Cool. So back to this being a self-organizing organization, or here is a bit more official phrasing of the same thing. It's quite a mouthful, but fundamentally what it means, it's autonomous teams that are empowered to make decisions and to achieve their purpose in whichever way they like. It's based on a book by Brian Robertson, who has written this in 2009, and in turn this is based or has its roots in Sociocracy, which comes out of the Netherlands in the 1970s. The most famous of all the Holacracy implementations is definitely Zappos, and what I find interesting about Zappos is that the information that's coming out of it is highly contradictory. Some people think it's great, some people think it's not so great, so experiences differ. And I also have to admit myself, when I read about it, when I read the Constitution, it's a truckload of rules, and it seems very inhumane. The language is not really inviting, and in a way, it really sounds like a cult. And this is how our CEO phrased it. And I think it's very true, but what I thought was, well, I'm already an Agile coach, I love meat, and I do CrossFit too, so what's another cult? And we had a really open conversation that just because it's a language we don't particularly like, and it's some facets of it that we don't think are great, what we could do is run a true experiment, focus on the philosophy, and defer the judgment if something is working or not. And this is the place when people usually ask me, so how did you get Snapper to do this? And I have to say, well, I didn't. This is something where the exec team, where the leadership team decided, hey, this sounds really, really cool. We want to give this a shot. And because Holacracy has so many rules, I'm not going to talk to all of this or tell you exactly what it is. But what I do want to do is focus on a number of key concepts that have had a huge impact on us as a company. And I want to talk you through about how those things work, roughly, and what was good for us, what was bad, and how we implemented it at Snapper. And the first thing is that we focus on autonomous circles. And autonomous circles are quite similar to the usual Agile teams, whether they are software development or outside. It's something that's, it's a team that has a purpose, and people can decide how they want to achieve that purpose. It's entirely up to them. The most important circle is the general circle, which is a circle that encompasses the entire company. And like everything else, that circle has a purpose and a number of accountabilities. And you might think that this sounds exactly like a mission and a vision, and it kind of does. What's special about Holacracy there is that that purpose translates into sub-circles. So if you got the company circle, there are sub-circles, and again, those circles can decide to have sub-circles if they want to. And what you get is that purpose that cascades from one circle to the next. And in the end, it makes it possible to abolish any hierarchy of people and replace it completely with a hierarchy of purpose. It's a bit like thinking of nested dolls, where one is bigger than the other. And as you go from one to the next, you get more and more focus. What it has done to us was because Snapper has a good culture and has a good culture and is quite flat, it was hard for us to have explicit accountabilities. And with those accountabilities, we found it hard to talk about it because it felt kind of wrong. And this gave us a forum to make this possible, to say, hey, we got this, we can expect this other thing from you. And I talked to the CEO recently, and he said, well, it actually feels a lot lighter because he doesn't have to know what's going on over there. He can just focus on the things over here that he is doing. And he knows that those are the accountabilities and the purpose of the other circle. And something that is actually really important about Holacracy is that this is not just a hierarchy that goes from top to bottom, it goes both ways. And this is important both for the information flow and also to make sure that people don't start telling each other what to do. The way this is implemented is in the form of links, where one circle is linked to another circle by having a role or a person that is represented in the other circle. So basically that means if you've got an outer circle like BI Tech, then an iOS circle would have a representative link in the tech circle who has the task to carry information back and forth, but also has full voting right in the parent circle. So there's a representation which is almost a bit like union rights, and that protects the lower child circle from having anything done to them that they don't want. And what you get, and what we got, was participation of people from all levels all of a sudden in broader areas of the company. The second thing that was really important to us were actually roles. And roles in Holacracy are quite different from roles or from normal job roles. The difference is that they're much smaller and much more granular. So whenever I've had a job, my job description looked roughly like this. Lots of things that I was supposed to do. But what I really did was part of the things in my job description, part of the things that are entirely different because something needed to be done. And what Holacracy does is not just accept that reality, but also making sure that we can surface that reality. So in Holacracy, each person has a number of really small granular roles, such as some person who writes the board report, or some person who deals with customer insights. And for us, it was really useful to have roles that helped us split the work into smaller elements. Like we had a solutions architect who decided he was really good at finding solutions with an existing client, but he hated the outgoing sales. So what was possible for him to do was to split that into two roles. Someone else who loved outgoing sales could take over that part, and the solutions architect could focus on the other part of his role and take on a new role, which is coaching young developers. So basically people could work to their strength and also to what they were interested in. And we ended with something that was quite similar to, or that was effectively job crafting, which made people a lot happier than they had been before. It also made it possible to have to dynamically allocate roles, to have short-term roles. For example, if we had an audit by Pricewaterhouse, someone needs to coordinate that, but we don't have to go through HR, we don't have to make anything official. Just the circle can decide we need this role, and once it's done, we can abolish this role. And I have to say the process of defining roles was one of the most tedious things I've ever done. And the reason it's so tedious is because when you have a company where people do whatever is needed, there will be a huge number of things that are just entangled. And it's really hard to find out what people are actually doing. It took us ages to write down what is each of us actually doing, get together in a meeting, and then figure out what are the things we should be doing, how could we define the roles. So but it was really good because we found out that some of us were actually not doing the important parts of our work. We had coaches who found out they were spending 70% of their time on development rather than coaching young developers. And it was actually good to find out and to make this explicit and actually do something about that. And as tedious of roles might have been to agree on and to figure out, it's something that's part of our daily lives. And once it's done the first time, it's actually done. So we now do a checkup every 3 months, and it's not tedious anymore. We can just change things as they go. And the last thing that I do want to talk about are tensions and consent, because what Holacracy has, and I really like, is that it has continuous improvement basically baked in. It has it encourages everyone to look out for things that are not as they should be. Attention is a gap between what is and what could be. And it's actually a really positive thing. And we want people to walk around and spot things that could be improved, something that doesn't feel entirely right, and then use the process that Holacracy provides to make improvements. And improvements are made in there is a forum to discuss status tensions. There's a couple of meetings, and within those meetings, there's a way of making decisions, and that is consent. Difference between consent and consensus is that in consensus, everyone needs to agree. And what basically happens is that I've been in meetings where it's 5 minutes before we need to end. The meeting has been going for 3 hours. I'm now ready to agree to anything just to get out of the meeting. And consent kind of turns it on its head, where someone makes a proposal or a suggestion, and unless anyone else has a valid objection, we are going ahead. And a valid objection is not like I don't like this. A valid objection is something that moves us away from our purpose or slows us down, or is not safe to try. If no valid objection exists, then we're going ahead. So basically erring on the side of the action. For us, what that meant, there was nothing, no huge decision that was earth-shaking. What it meant for us that we had a lot of really, really small decisions that were really helpful, such as our solutions architect found out that there are way too many Amazon instances running, and we want to stop some of them because we're paying too much money. And what he found out was that for 6 months, he had been trying to figure out how to do this and how to go about it. Now he spotted a tension there. He suggested a policy in the circle where he knew those are the people affected, took one meeting to approve that policy, and it was done. And Snapper are saving $7,000 a month. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of such decisions coming out of all the meetings. So that was something that worked really, really well. A couple of things in Holacracy didn't work so well for us. And one was that there's a prescribed meeting format. And I think it's made for people who either really dislike each other or maybe for really large groups. But if you're a small group of people and you're professional facilitators, as many of us are, then it's actually not necessary. So we abolished the way, the formal way of running meetings, and are going for free format. All meetings at Snapper are optional. And we also decided to ditch all the official tools because they forced us through this process of the meeting format. So we realized because they made us collaborate less, we're not going to use them, we're just using Word or some other way. So in general, we have done this now for 2 years, and people are actually really, really happy that they have gone through with it. There has been a huge learning curve, and at times it was really hard and felt weird, but everyone is really happy and thinks that it has been worth it. And it was probably easier for the people who were outside of IT because they were not used to Agile already. On the other hand, it has had the biggest impact outside of technology and IT. And it has helped people to collaborate way better than they have before. It hasn't come without its challenges. It is hard for people to all of a sudden have this entire responsibility for an entire area that's quite important, and where they do have support, but ultimately they have a feel of responsibility and have decision-making power. And I think overall, we have achieved what we set out to achieve. We can grow and remain agile at the same time. We haven't descended into chaos and haven't turned into a big bureaucracy. Circles are at different stages of maturity, and we are trying it, or we are doing it across the entire business. And I think if you do want to try this yourself, there's 3 recommendations I have. And the first one is that I think you should live with a very, very strange language. Don't abolish it. We found it weird, but we also then remembered that in 2010, when we had introduced Agile, there were a lot of new concepts and new words. And we were discussing, well, a product owner is a bit like a project manager, so why don't we just call it a project manager? And only realized that in order to understand and learn new concepts, we needed new language. And that was helpful, so we decided to do this again, and we're really happy that we did it, and some of the words have become a lot more normal to us. I recommend starting to, in the beginning, to follow all the rules, and I know it is really important to end up with something that is adapted to a local context, but when we make changes, I think it's important to make them from a position of knowledge and not from a position that something has been too hard to implement. But it's also important not to just follow the rules and be obsessed with the system of rules. And there's so many in Holacracy, there's actually a danger of that happening. So instead of getting obsessed, I think it's also important to not miss the point in time where it's important to just think back about the principles and ditch some of the rules and follow what's important and the why. So today, what I think about Holacracy is that I don't think it's good. I don't think it's evil. I think it's just something that will amplify a culture that's already in place. It doesn't change a culture. And if the culture is not good, it will make things worse because you can amplify the silos. If you have a good culture, it will make a good culture great. And I think very much like Agile in the very beginning, what is going to happen is we'll find better ways of working. We won't take everything wholesale, but there's some really good elements that I believe are very useful for our organisational change. And basically, that's all I have to say.